Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel Master That English, where we understand, analyze and interpret the important texts that may be part of your English curriculum. Our topic for today is not a text but something that would help you to brush up your core concept. If you're a fresher, this is the right destination for you because today we are going to understand a form of drama which is tragedy. What is tragedy? From where did it evolve, and what are the things that you should be knowing about this form? Stay tuned and get your pens and notepads ready because here we go. Before we dive deep into this concept, I think it's always better to get an opinion and perspective of people who actually belong to that field. My personal favorite opinion of tragedy is the one given by Horace Walpole, in which he states that the world is tragedy to those who feel, but a comedy to those who think. This is quite philosophical in its approach. But what about the definition of tragedy? If you have to define tragedy, how are you going to define it? Too much bloodshed, too much beating, killing. Is that what tragedy really is? Not really. The Greek philosopher Aristotle defines tragedy with three basic essential terms. He says that a work is tragic only if it is comprising three core elements. First, it has to be serious. Second, it needs to have magnitude. And last but not the least is that it should be complete in itself. Okay, so we have three terms in front of us. But what do these terms really signify? What do they mean? And in order to find out that, we need to hold on a little and first get on with the very first concept of tragedy. From where did it start and what is the true genesis of tragedy? The emergence of tragedy was first to be seen in the Greek culture that goes way back to 6th BCE. This interesting fact leads us to our next question, which is, what was the purpose of tragedy in Greek culture? Why were they performing this in the first place? The simple answer to that was because tragedy was not just a form of entertainment. It was something very, very significant. It was something that was being performed to pay devotion to gods. It was a ritual. And this ritual was being performed in the Dionysian festival because the god to which they were providing devotion was the god Dionysus. He is also the god of wine, fertility, and ritual. So they were mainly performing this to pay devotion to him. Another interesting detail about the ritual lies in the name of tragedy itself, which has been derived from a Greek word that's called tragedia, and it means he-goat. The name has been he-goat because it is believed that in the Greek culture, when this ritual was being performed, there were many people who would perform their tragedies. In the end, there would be a final winner, and that winner would be presented with the goat. So the winner gets the goat, and the next thing that would happen is that this goat was then sacrificed to honor the Greek god Dionysus, for whom the ritual was being performed. Hence, tragedy did benefit the Greek society in three ways. First, it was a way to give devotion to your god. Second, it was a way to also educate the masses about their culture, their tradition, the mythological beliefs that they had. And last but not the least, it was also a way to warn the audience about the things that they should avoid in their lives to become better citizens of their country. And that was with the example of the tragic hero. Now, these famous tragic heroes have been popularized by the works of the three famous tragic writers of the time. These include Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, where each writer was attempting to write about a famous mythological character from their culture. For instance, Aeschylus has written a trilogy work that is about a Greek commander, Agamemnon. Similarly, Sophocles has also written a trilogy that is about the king of Thebes, Oedipus. Last but not the least is Euripides, whose works' titles have been taken from the famous Greek mythological female figures Medea and Electra. This overview of the tragic writers and their works now leads us to our next segment, which is the major elements in Greek tragedies. So, what are the things that are required in a Greek tragedy? The first, that is the most significant one, is that it is the tragic tale of a hero. Who is this hero? This hero, according to the description given by the Greek philosopher Aristotle in his work Poetics, he states that heroes should be of a noble birth. When we say a noble birth, that means that the person should be either from aristocracy, and the other thing that he can possess is that he could be a famous legendary warrior who has fought the wars and is there in the mythological tales of the Greek myths. The other important thing that is required is the qualities in a tragic hero. What are the things that he should possess so that we can call and define him as a tragic hero? This essential flaw that is there in a tragic hero is called hamartia. That basically means that the tragic hero should have a lack of judgment. He is never able to use his reason in a clear and rational way, which is the reason why he commits a lot of mistakes all through the journey and the course of the story. So, the essential things that are required that a tragic hero must possess. The first is that he has excessive pride. Because he is very egoistic, he always thinks about himself and nothing else beyond himself, which is why he is very narcissistic. The second thing is that he has a lot of greed and desire for power and materialistic things. This is the reason why he is never able to listen to the voice of his own conscience. He is always easily persuaded by whatever people are telling him because they always try to show him the things that he always desires in life. So, whether it is any tragic story, there's always a villain who is always trying to persuade this tragic hero about the things that he can possess and acquire in life, because of which he thinks nothing else but the main goal and ambition that he has in his mind. The last but not the least is that this tragic hero is also a victim of circumstances. That means fate never favors him. And because of this, sometimes even his wise decisions are not fruitful. The second important element in a tragic play is that even the tragic plot has some specific traits that need to be incorporated. The first in this would be peripetia. What is peripetia? It is the major turning point for a tragic hero. We will understand this perspective with an example of the great work written by William Shakespeare, which is Macbeth. This is a work in which you get to see that the protagonist, Macbeth, is initially a warrior, but his ambition and the greed for prosperity makes him kill his own emperor, and gradually he is trapped in his own conspiracy because the people are easily able to trace his error and make him realize his mistake. So in the play Macbeth, the regicide of King Duncan is the peripetia for Macbeth. This is the point in which Macbeth cannot go back. He has to go on and he has to kill the other people who are related with King Duncan. He has to follow the wrong actions one after the other just to protect himself, because he knows if he doesn't do that, he is going to get caught by other people and he is definitely going to suffer, because killing your emperor is a very heinous and also betraying your country. So this is what is the main point of peripetia. The other essential element in a plot is anagnosis. That is the moment of sudden awareness. This is when the tragic hero identifies the cause of his downfall. In the play Macbeth, this is the moment when Macbeth realizes that he has been manipulated and misled by the three witches, who have constantly been assuring him about the things that he is going to achieve in life, the prosperity that is going to come very soon. But what really happens is that he has been tricked by these three witches. And when he realizes that, he is found to be saying the words, "And be these juggling fiends no more, believe that patter us in double set." The next essential element in a tragedy is catharsis, which is mainly related with the reaction of the audience, because it is about the purification and the purging that the audience experiences with the sudden release of emotion. This is mostly to be seen in the conclusion part of the play. In Macbeth, the audience is unable to accept the killing of the innocent king Duncan by Macbeth. So when he is eventually killed by Macduff and the character Macduff appears holding Macbeth's severed head in his hand, it helps to purge the audience of the emotions that were associated with Macbeth's wrong act. In this process, what we notice is that catharsis helps to evolve two important emotions. First is fear, and the other is pity. The fear is experienced in the audience because they realize that the sight is something that is very, very scary. It is very bloody. There is a lot of bloodshed involved in that act. But they also experience a sense of pity for the character, because even though they know that the character has performed something wrong, they do somewhere feel bad that the character is also no longer there in front of them. Hence, catharsis is considered to be very essential for the work to be successful, because by the release of emotion and by the experience of pity and fear, these two emotions actually help in reforming the audience by purifying and purging their emotions in a complete, wholesome manner. At that note, let's move to the next segment of our lecture, which is mainly about the shift of tragedy to a different culture. From the Greek tragedy, that is the 6th BCE, we are now moving to the next civilization where tragedy found its prominent role. That was in the Roman civilization. This Roman civilization is mainly recorded in the period 240 BC. And the dramatist who has popularized the works at this particular time was Seneca. Although the storyline and everything that was there in it was somewhat the same, the only alteration they made was in the name of the characters. So they always had an alternate name for the hero that was represented in the Greek tradition. But there was another important significant difference that was there between Greek tragedy and the Roman tragedy, which is the Greek tragedies were didactic and subtle. That means even if a negative character is performing a wrong role, he would eventually reform himself by the end of the story. That is the reason why the characters, even though they were negative, they were balanced characters. On the other hand, the Roman dramas were very melodramatic in their plot structure, and the characters were very loud. They didn't really learn anything from the wrong acts that they commit. They don't really reform in the end as in the Greek plays. So this was the kind of imbalance that was to be seen in the Roman plays. And this culture was transferred into another culture, that is in England, where they were adapting the same culture that the Senecans were really following. So that brings us to the very next question, that when this shift was taking place in the 16th century, why was this shift really taking place? And how was it taking place? Now, the shift was taking place for the very prime reason that the Romans were focusing on melodrama, a lot of loud expression. And such expressions and this kind of plot structure always helps to achieve the very essential thing that is required, that is entertainment, entertainment, and only entertainment. England wanted to follow the same feature, and that is the reason why they were more influenced by the Roman plays than the Greek plays. The other important aspect of how this work was being adapted was mainly through translation, because the 16th century was a time when writers would be translating works so that there is more inspirational aspect represented and people can write better work so that they can entertain the audience in the best way possible. That brings us to the next section, which was the first tragedy performed in England and written in England. This first work was called Gorboduc, and it was written by Sackville and Norton. The work was again inspired by the Senecan tragedies. It is a work that is written in blank verse and is a verse drama. What it mainly deals with is a political subject because it is about family feud over kingdom and how this greed for money and possession of property actually leads to a lot of destruction in the empire, leading to misery and desolation. That brings us to the final segment in our lecture, that is Essential elements in Elizabethan tragedy. This may somewhat resonate with the Greek tragedy elements that we have studied in the initial part of the lecture. Let us first assume the very first trait, that is the tragic hero. You'll notice that many of the historical plays written in the Elizabethan time, especially the ones that are written by Shakespeare, there is a reference of lot of English emperors that have ruled England at a particular point of time, such as Shakespeare's plays include many emperors in the historical context. These include Henry IV, Henry V, VI, VII, VIII, and even Richard III, where you can see that there is a sort of tragic theme represented at a slant level. Then there is another example of Christopher Marlowe, who has written the historical work Edward II, which also has a tragic theme running through the storyline. The next important thing that you'll notice is that where the tragic theme is very, very violent and there is bloodshed involved, there is a reference of foreign rulers and characters in those plays. These include Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, where both the rulers are actually Roman kings. Both the works have been written by Shakespeare. And also another work that is written by Christopher Marlowe would be Dr. Faustus, where Dr. Faustus is actually a German scientist. So you notice that foreign rulers and characters are something that was also being included in the tragedy plays. The next essential element is the tragedy setting, where you'll notice that most of the tragedies of Shakespeare that were always ending with a very sad note were actually set in foreign countries. For example, Hamlet was set in Denmark, Macbeth in Scotland, Romeo and Juliet in Italy, and Othello in Venice and Cyprus. This feature was very beneficial because in no way were you hurting the sentiments of the audience, because the setting was in a foreign country, so people were very, very comfortable with the extravagant theme and the bloodshed that was being represented on stage. The next aspect that you would see as an element is the expression that is used in the tragedy. The very first thing that you'll notice in the expression is the way and manner in which it was represented, which was usually in blank verse, where the blank verse actually helped in creating a dramatic effect in the expression of the character. The next thing was the use and incorporation of soliloquy. Soliloquy again added emotional intensity for the character who was speaking. The one in front of you is a line that is actually spoken by the character Hamlet, where he says a very paradoxical statement, to be or not to be. The purpose of soliloquy was firstly to express the inner thoughts of the character. The second was to reveal the nature of the speaker, what kind of person or human being that is. And last but not the least was to help to overcome the limitation of time. You could tell a lot of information without, in a way, exploiting the unities of time, place, and action. So this is how soliloquy was serving a benefit in a lot of ways. The other element that is found in Elizabethan tragedy is that the play was always structured in 5 acts. Now, why was the play structured in 5 acts? What were the dramatists really trying to achieve by this structure? The answer to this question lies in the diagram that has been represented by the 18th century dramatist Gustav Freytag, where he believed that the reason why plays are usually structured in a 5-act is because the storyline always followed a kind of pyramid structure, where the starting initial events are represented with the word exposition. When the events start gradually moving towards more kind of issues and problems, that is the rising action. The climax is the main point in which you get to know what the problem is all about. The falling action is when the complications gradually start taking shape or form, and you also start understanding why that problem is taking place in the first hand. Last but not the least is denouement, which is also represented as the resolution. That is when all the events actually come to an end because things are resolved. That is the reason why Elizabethan followed this 5-act structure that helped in understanding the storyline and also helped in maintaining the structure in a very, very unified form. Then after this, we have another thing that is called the chorus, which was usually represented in the starting of the play and sometimes in the middle and also in the end. This was an inspiration from the Greek tradition. So, if we have to compare the chorus of the two distinct culture, you will notice that the chorus in each culture is performing a very unique role. Where in the Greek chorus, the you would notice that chorus was actually a very essential part of the play because chorus was helping in doing a lot of activities and functions. The first thing that it did was it helped to adhere to the unities of time, place, and action. That is the reason why their presentation was very disciplined. The second thing that they did was that the chorus controlled, advised, and restrained the chief character through the problems that they were facing. So they would advise the protagonist. They would always try to give a very moralistic note in whatever they would speak and advise even the main protagonist. The other thing that the chorus did was that the lyrical chants that they were speaking would add beauty in the whole presentation of the play. And that, in a way, was also providing a kind of reverence to the god that they were praising during the ritual. That is, mostly god Dionysus. Whereas in the Elizabethan chorus, the chorus was mainly used to overcome the drawbacks of the stage. What were these drawbacks? We will come to that point in the end. The next perspective that the chorus did was it was only preparing the audience by explaining each act. So they would only give a brief overview of the action that was going to take place. The next element that we'd see in Elizabethan tragedy was the impact of country's culture. Just like in Greek tragedy, there was a lot of influence of the culture by the myths that were represented. Even in the English tragedies, you would notice that there was incorporation of that culture, their own culture, in their works. This was by the religious theme that was being incorporated in the works. This religious theme is about the triumph of good over evil. And this was usually by the influence of the native religious drama, miracle, and morality plays, which were always talking about the effect of not being carried over by the vice and the evils that are usually around us. You can see this example very well stated in the work written by Christopher Marlowe, that is Dr. Faustus, where Dr. Faustus has been very easily fooled by the devils who have been able to tempt him by giving him the kind of things that he always desires, which is the freedom to explore the world, enjoy every fruitful thing in his life, but at the price of selling his soul after a period of time. This again is representing a very moralistic note that the culture is actually trying to give to its people, that you should not be tempted by evil that is represented in the society. The only limitation in the presentation of the tragedy was that it had an imperfect presentation. That means it failed to follow the unities of time, place, and action, because of which the plays were never in a disciplined and structured form. And that is the reason why many critics in the later period have criticized many of the works in the Elizabethan time for not following that discipline. The only person who could follow the disciplined order was the comedian Ben Jonson. He has only been appreciated for following and adhering to that principle. On that limitation note, it's time for us to limit our lecture because we have come to the very end. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. If you're new to this channel, do subscribe it, like it if you feel that the content is good, and also share it because sharing is caring. This is me, Karishma, signing off for now. Have a wonderful day or night whenever you're hearing this. See you soon in the next lecture. Toodles!